Travel and Things, in association with Rugged Wear, Real People, Real Clothing, Real Solutions, presents In Conversation With. But before we get to my guest today, winter isn't coming. Winter is here already, people. And if you haven't got one of the Rugged Wear jackets to keep you warm in these cold winter nights, then why are you still here? Get onto their website, go and have a look at their online catalog and make this one of your purchases. And also, if you have somebody, Father's Day is coming up right in the middle of June, and a good time or a good idea to give dad one of these. My guest today is from African Edu Eco, and that is Wayne Johnson. Wayne, good morning. Welcome to you.
Good morning, David. Thank you for having me.
It's only a pleasure. Wayne, when you and I started talking, and it seems to have been like a decade ago, if you take COVID and where you've been running around into account, little did I know that your list of qualifications extends for almost an entire A4 page. Um, a- and I know that I think the only qualification you don't have as yet is the astrology rather than astronomy, or astronomy rather. I never get those right. It's like psychotic and psychic. I always mix them up.
I try not to mix the astronomy and the astrology. Telling tales in astronomy is more so related to the myths and legends associated with the different constellations, as opposed to being a mind reader or whatever you want to term it with astrology.
I always worry that every Gemini in the world is sort of, do they not realize that everybody's getting the same uh, guidance for a particular day just because you fall under a star sign? But that's not what we're here to talk about. Let me just run through some of your qualifications. Bachelor of Physical Education, MSc in Sports Psychology, FAGASA, SKS Dangerous Game, SKS Birding, National Bird Guide, Marine Guide, Specialist Training Provider. You studied at Cornell Bird Academy. You got a diploma in bird biology, snake handling and first aid. The list goes on and on. Can I ask you?
Oh,
Can I ask you, Wayne, to take us back to Wayne Johnson in high school? What were you like?
I
Did you
think
know that this is what you wanted to do?
it was never on my agenda. Being a professional sportsman, at that stage during the dark ages, one would normally associate going with whatever your professional sport was. Hence the reason why I studied physical education.
Right.
Um, Having been a professional sportsman just meant that was the route that I needed to take from a university qualification. But the interest in all things natural was there right from the early age of 15.
Mm.
And I was one of these guys that would pick up and investigate anything that was out there, and try and analyze it and assess it and see exactly what its form and function is.
Right.
This is something that stuck with me forever throughout my life. I've got a very inquiring mind. Um, uh, from a study perspective, it's always been a very good thing just to try and learn as much. You can pretty much say I'm a scholar of the University of Life, more so than what my qualifications are about. Because if you don't learn, you don't grow, and if you
Yeah.
don't grow, you die. Simple philosophy.
True enough. If only more people would see the world in that way. The reason for chatting to you today is specifically looking at your birding mentorships. Tell us a bit about those. I think these are some of your students.
Yeah, these are some of the students. I was approached by BirdLife South Africa, being one of the bird-friendly operators within their ambit.
Right.
And they approached me and said, look, they want to reinitiate their bird or their community bird guide program, which has been running over 20 years, but it sort of went into a flux for the last 4 years. I got into discussion with Andrew de Block, who heads up this particular section at BirdLife South Africa. And I rose to the challenge for the simple fact is I believe birding has to change its emphasis, particularly from a community bird guide point of view.
Right.
Many a bird guide out there and community bird guide has essentially become, and I say many, but not all, have become list chasers, and they try and get as many species as they can with limited or no interpretation of what the important aspects of those birds are. What is their status? What is the biome they would find themselves in? And this led to the reinitiation of this project under with funding from Eskom to train grassland guides. I started on the program with eight potential candidates. I'm now down to 7, because at the end of the day, you need the right qualities and the right aptitude to be able to do these type of programs. It's very intense. It works around the notion of not only observing and ticking, it's all about observation. Whether one can identify or not is immaterial, because you can always relay back to a book. So my simple philosophy with all the training I do in all spheres of training is I look at observation, and then identification is, yes, you either know it or you don't, but you can actually interpret what you are seeing at that particular stage and interpret it in your understandable terms, and then make reasonable deductions, and then that ultimately leads to your guest satisfaction. You can always come back to an identification. For me, it's not the be-all and end-all, and it doesn't make anyone a hero by knowing 950-odd species of birds and all their scientific names if you can't talk about them. So hence the reason why I got involved in the project. Initially, the project was requested for 4 weeks. I said, unfortunately, I don't do those short-term projects. For me, this is an unfolding. So I basically proposed a 4-week practical phase, which has been done in Wakkerstroom. And the second phase is a 3-week phase, which will be done in August, September. The intermediate phase is actually to study up and come back with all relevant information that's required.
What's the bird life like in the Wakkerstroom area?
But Wakkerstroom is a great hotspot. It has initially it was discovered by the likes of Ian Sinclair way back when. That really introduced the world to Wakkerstroom as a hotspot. Why I say it's a hotspot from a grassland perspective, if one knows and understands grassland biomes, they're under severe threat. And it is our second biggest biome in South Africa after the savanna biome, right, which actually presents a number of really good endemic species. I mean, when you start talking about Rudd's larks and you start talking about Boerter's larks, your 3 crane species, you start talking about ground woodpeckers. Those are just a couple on a very big list of birds that one would normally associate with grassland. So it's a very exciting area. A lot of people do visit the area. I mean, you get blue coran, you get a variety of larks, cisticolas, pipits, and then obviously with the wetland in Wakkerstroom, which is where Wakkerstroom has its big origins, was with the initial discovery of the white-winged flufftail, which is a highly endangered and highly threatened species throughout South Africa. Well, not in grassland-related wetlands in South Africa. And the only other place that you would find them is in Ethiopia. So you get a lot of those species, which are those shy, elusive, and skulking animals that you don't necessarily always see.
Was that flufftail not the bird of the year 4 years ago, if I remember correctly?
I wouldn't venture a guess as to when it was. Look, it is a bird that's getting a lot of conservation-related attention right now, which is a very good thing.
This bird that we're looking at now is not a zebra finch, although its face looks like it could be a zebra. So what is it and why is it special?
This is a Cape bunting. It is found in that particular area in quite large numbers. It's an interesting bird in the way in which it associates with other seed-eating birds. And if you want really good sightings of Cape bunting, it's a good spot to see them in the upper grasslands.
Okay. The other one, you mentioned them, cisticolas and larks. Why is it that people like myself battle with cisticolas, larks, and pipits, specifically larks and pipits? Those things, with the exception of the rufous-naped lark, the others had me at hello, basically.
I think, anyone that's starting out in birding will normally know and associate the term little brown jobs with your larks, cisticolas, pipits, and others. For me, as one progresses in birding, so the challenge becomes that much greater to try and know and get to know habits,
Right.
distributions and calls associated with those species. Those species essentially are, and as far as I'm concerned, from an identification point of view, is you turn the identification process on its head, and you start off, if you do know distribution, where you are found, and what type of cisticola or warbler, pipit or lark you would find in that particular area, and then go backwards by listening to call. Call is one of the definitive features of those birds. And that's where the real challenge lies. And it's something that is a progression. It's nothing that happens overnight, but they are a challenge. And to the layman or the new birder or the new incumbent into birding, they do pose a challenge. What I normally encourage is that folks go out with these, with experts in these birds, and actually learns from them, because that's the easiest way to learn. If you're just going to do referencing to books, 9 times out of 10 you'll become unstuck with the bird.
Well, this seems to be what happens to me often. Is I will go through my bird book more than once and go, no, I've discovered a brand new species. And then I'll send it to my go-to birder, and he'll come back and he'll tell me what it is. And he'll go, no, David, it's found in that area very regularly. You haven't discovered anything new.
Yeah, it's normally that type of situation, but you also get geographical color differences and features, which often flummoxes people with them. I mean, I've just got to the notion now that I do work on distribution and call
Okay.
when I'm doing highly specific identification. This is one of my favorite birds that you've got on screen at the moment, is the ground woodpecker, which one of its haunts is that are in and around Wackerstrom in the higher areas.
Right.
Fascinating birds, obviously a completely terrestrial bird. It doesn't, it roosts and nests in sandbanks, very much like you'd find swallows, martins, those type of birds. So if you're looking at it from a woodpecker point of view, it has striking differences, but normally associated with rocky outcrops and very prevalent in grassland areas.
Okay. And then the other bird picture, this one I really like. It took me a moment. When I first saw this image, I thought, whoever took this photograph, why did they place that piece of foliage right in the middle of the image? And then I realized how beautiful it actually makes this image, and it puts the bird into context.
Yeah, well, thank you. It is one of my photographs, and when I was photographing this is a young Levailon cisticola, and when I took this photograph, I probably took about 400 photos of it, moving from different position to different position. But as you say, the composition I liked was that it highlights the eye and the head with that differentiation between the two parts of the flower of that particular plant.
Yeah.
But they're very much associated with the wetland areas fringing onto grassland, and you normally find them in abundance no matter where you go.
All right, and staying with this looks like a similar bird, and got himself all or herself all fluffed up in the early morning.
Eastern long-billed lark, quite common in that area. No, sorry. This is a spike-heeled lark.
Right.
If I'm remembering correctly. This was a spike-heeled lark that was alongside the road that was very puffed up. It was a cold morning, but was also displaying with a number of other birds. But with that fluffed up appearance, it was quite a nice photograph.
It is indeed. And then for people who want more information, they can always contact you. And the contact details are on the screen at the moment. I didn't actually want to get that far right now. We'll come back to that particular slide, Wayne, don't worry about it. But you see a lot of these in the parks where the car is pulled up on the side of the road. There's nothing sort of wandering across the road with teeth or claws, and then you look at the back and it says birder friendly, and they will sit there for hours peering at what seems to be absolutely nothing, but they're excited about whatever they're watching.
I mean, okay, this birder friendly logo is more so associated with companies or operators that have been granted this privilege as being bird friendly. When you come up on that bumper sticker, it normally says bird watching.
Yeah.
Beware, pass, go by.
Yeah, please.
I think agritourism and bird watching has developed immensely over the last couple of years. There's a heightened interest in it. And certainly, I think it's a natural extension from your mammals. I mean, many a birder right now is also becoming very familiar and au fait with butterflies and dragonflies and damselflies. That seems to be a natural progression as well.
Just going back to the mentorship, to the course that you run, how do people get involved? What sort of levels of qualifications are you looking for when they start the course? Can it be from knowing absolutely nothing, or do you expect a certain level from the participants?
David, it's an interesting thing. I mean, this particular community bird guide program, each of the persons went through quite a stringent selection criteria to come onto the program. Generally, I prefer folks that are reasonably unknowledgeable as startups, and they don't come with any preconceived ideas or opinions as to identification or anything, and they're very receptive to learning.
Right.
So with all the particular programs that I do present, and from a bird training point of view, it's not only isolated to community bird guide programs. I have a number of programs on offer. The birds in picture are obviously two of the most, it's an endangered population of Boerter's larks that are found in a very distinct area close to Wackerstrom.
Right.
And they're very sought after because they're often not seen. Incidentally, this particular pair, I was walking along a roadside, just watching and listening to see if they were calling. And I nearly stood on these two and they didn't bother to move. They just stayed put, which gave me an opportunity to photograph them like no one's business, which is wonderful. But coming back to your question with the training, I prefer newbies, or aspirant birders or aspirant bird guides to come with a reasonable level of understanding and being able to identify a number of species, more so the common bird, garden bird species. When someone comes and they've got a bird list of 700 bird species, you're not going to teach them new tricks, aside from becoming actually sound interpreters of what those birds do, what their form and function is, and how they fit into their environment, and what are their preferences insofar as environment, habitat, and feeding is concerned. It's easy to identify 700 odd bird species if you've been doing it for a while.
Yeah.
But, to be able to interpret is, for me, the key. Many a person will go to a game lodge or a game reserve and they'll have someone talk for an hour on lions. And I'm saying, yeah, but why can't we afford that to birds? I mean, when you're looking at a group of southern-bald ibises in a colony roost, and they're breeding, and you look at all the shenanigans that are going on, there's many a story to be told, but those stories are not told. Oh, there's a southern-bald ibis, and then, okay, I've ticked it now, let's move on. To me, that's not the true essence of birding.
Do you have a favorite birding story that has occurred in your life, where something has happened? Maybe you went to an area and didn't expect to see a bird and it was there, or you woke up one morning and there was I don't know, something sitting in your tent peering at you saying, photograph me because you'll never see me again.
Funny enough, that wasn't a Southern African feature. I spent 2 years in Ghana, and I got to see the yellow-necked spurfowl, or the Picathies. And we went hunting for these birds to actually try and locate where one or two had been seen the previous week. And we were skulking through this dense vegetation, and all of a sudden, I heard a little running sound to the left of me. And I turned to look. And the interesting thing is that only one or two birds had been seen there. But on this particular occasion, there were 9 birds together.
Wow.
Which was an incredibly rare sighting, but it was wonderful. And Murphy's Law, wonderful sighting, couldn't get the camera out in time and they disappeared before night. So
that always happens. That's why you carry the camera in your hand, ready and switched on. Wayne, do I have to teach you about photography?
That's all good and well and said when you're walking on slippery surfaces and moss-filled rocks, because that's their typical habitat.
Yeah.
you always, I mean, you carry an expensive camera in your hand, and you don't want to try and slip and then try and brace yourself on these surfaces.
Yeah, I hear
But I
what,
mean, certainly in Africa, there's many an experience to be told regarding birding. But you know, for me, every single sighting is a special sighting. Every single bird that I see is a special bird that I see. Because I try and relate it in terms of what I'm observing and what I interpret as that bird doing at that particular stage.
right.
And I love relaying these messages to either my guest profile that I have with me, or to potential candidates or students of birding.
Just courses, are they run on a regular basis or are they run sort of ad hoc as and when?
You know, I run them ad hoc at the moment, and there's no particular scheduling, although from next year, post-COVID, hopefully, I will then schedule dates, but I'm only going to run 1 or 2 programs a year and create a demand for the programs. You know, many of the programs I run throughout Africa are ad hoc. Someone will get hold of me and say, look, I've got 10 people that need to be trained in birding. And then I'd say, right, here I come. It's for this duration. And I end up there, and, you know, I learn a whole lot of new things in many of the destinations I go to. But also, for me, it's a lifelong pursuit of just knowing and understanding all the inhabitants of Africa in a much greater context.
If people want to phone you or want to get hold of you, I suppose the easiest is info@africanedueco.com.
Yeah, that's the easiest way to contact me. Being on the road as I am, I very seldom sit in this type of surrounding, being in an office or a room. Normally my backdrop is some natural wonder out there.
Right.
But certainly an email to info@africanedueco.com is normally responded to quite quickly.
Great stuff. I'll say goodbye to you in a moment, but before we do that, we have to have a word from our sponsor. And as I said earlier, winter is here, people. Forget Game of Thrones. It's cold at the moment, and specifically if you're going into the Lowveld. So why don't you get yourself one of these brand new rugged wear, high quality winter jackets for both men and women. And if you're going to buy one for the person in your life that you love most, why don't you buy one for yourself at the same time? Wayne, once again, I didn't mean to go back there, but Fugasa is involved in this. Fugasa seems to be involved in almost every aspect of your career, which is always a good thing. That's the Field Guides Association of South Africa. Once again, if you want to get hold of Wayne, it's info@africanedueco. That's EDUECO.com. Wayne Johnson, thank you so much for being my guest. I know that you're off north of the border for an extended period of time. I hope you travel safely and come back with lots of new images and lots of new stories to share.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, David, and thank you for having me on the program.
It's only a pleasure.